welcome Dr. Tapsi to ICC CWC platform. And we are really pleased to have you. Dr. Tapsi comes from wonderful background with not only from the neuroscience, also from psychiatry and also spirituality. So she also is expert in yoga and meditation, mind-body aspect. And she is a faculty at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston and Harvard Medical School. She is also specialized into the senior geriatric psychiatry. So that means all the problems we face into the senior years. So she is going to talk to us a little bit about her expertise overall to give us an overview.
First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to be here as usual. It's always lovely, and Sachin, you've just built such a sort of like a great wellness initiative. So it's lovely to come down here. I always learn new things when I come down here, and to I'm sorry, it's quite late here in the East Coast. So without further ado, I'm going to launch into what I think we should be talking about. I confess I'm going to play the a lazy faculty expert. And how has COVID-19 pandemic really affected? Can I have a few people sort of like volunteering? Because I think part of it is also like I want to know what you guys are going through. I think Sachinji told me that this is mostly a very positive group, right? Which is kind of what happens when you've been practicing mind body medicine or mind body initiatives for a while, right? A lot of us get into a frame of mind where there is increased resilience and things affect less. But but sort of with practice also comes a sensitivity and a sense of being in touch with what's happening around you. And when there is a lot of grief and sadness around you, that could also affect you, right? So 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 this pandemic has sort of is divided into three phases, right? Like the first one was this acute, really stressful, explain what was going to hit us, and part of it is just the nature of pandemics. So there was that acute phase, and then we got into this slow burn phase where we didn't like we knew what it was, we kind of knew where this is going to go, but really it made us feel small, right? Nature looked really big and insurmountable. You could do anything. The ICUs were full. We were all at frontline. None of us ever expected to be in COVID clinics, but we volunteered and we sort of saw the worst. And then the third phase where there is hope, right? Like we are all we've got. We've got a vaccine, and the vaccines look pretty good. So this looks like it might be something we can control. So how has this affected you guys?
It's been a little more lonely, even though my wife and I are here at home. We have 4 grandchildren that we haven't been able to hug in a year, and so it just makes us feel a little more isolated. So I think that's what's happening to us. But I agree with you that at least there's some hope on the horizon, and I'm hoping more people will follow the rules and help tamp down how spread it is right now across our country.
Right, absolutely. The loneliness, the isolation, the not being able to see your loved ones, right? Like the Thanksgiving being different, Christmases being different. I think that's what I hear day in and day out. I agree. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Anything else?
Dr. Tapsi, I would go along with what he said. This year, this was my first grandchild, and I was looking forward to spend time with her. But due to COVID, it was hard. So for me, it was a different sadness because I was excited, but at the same time, I was sad because I'm not able to go and spend time with her.
Oh, that's so hard. Congratulations on the first grandchild, though. But that's hard. Right? That's the hardest part. Right.
Thank you.
Right. Any one of your essential workers, frontliners?
Yeah, and this is Feroz. And I think I've somehow been able to give myself a more positive spin about what has happened in the last 8 months.
Yeah.
And one of the transitions or transformation would be too dramatic a word to use in this context, but one of the transitions or one of the changes I've experienced is we've been able to, and I personally have been able to move more from a human doing to a human being, because it has allowed me to look internally and do more soul searching and really connect with those few people that you really care for and you really enjoy, and those sort of things. So
yeah, so this is sort of like maybe the silver lining of the pandemic, right?
yes,
Like
yes, yes,
you're able
yes,
to look beyond like the flappings and trappings and
yes,
connect on a human level. And
yes,
and it showed us that human beings probably will be there for each other. You know, worst
yes,
comes to worst, we will always sort of like probably be there for each other, which is very hard.
absolutely,
I agree.
yes.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was wonderful. Yeah.
Hi, doctor.
Hi.
This is Shubha here.
Yeah, Shubha.
So one good thing about the pandemic is that I could never attend Sachinji's yoga classes before, because it always used to be the time that I had to drop my kids to school.
Yeah.
Now, because of this pandemic, one very positive thing that has happened is I can attend Sachinji's yoga classes
That's right.
because it's on Zoom and I don't need to drop kids to school, and then everybody is at home. That's another positive thing. We have the whole family, and we don't know when we will get this chance again, so we are trying to make as much together. And my daughter finished her high school graduation. It was a drive through graduation, but still we are all, there is much more than just the graduation, right? And then she had to go to college, she stayed at home. Then we thought maybe it's a gift from God for us to spend with her 6 more months, right? So yeah, a lot of positive things actually. Though it is quite hard to just be at home and don't go outside and mingle, but we have kind of formed like a bubble, like a few friends, and then we try to still meet with masks, and every 2 weeks we have Zoom calls, and we try to still maintain all the the festivals and do everything.
Lovely. Yeah, no, I agree. I think you had a few points in there. First of all, congratulations on the graduation. And two, I also, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't think, I think I met Sachinji because of the pandemic. If not, I don't think we would have connected with each other. Dada is here. And I think we sort of like connected and we were able to sort of do this. If there was no pandemic, I don't think I would be meeting you wonderful people. I agree. And I think what you're doing is really what we should all be doing in the pandemic, right? Sort of digitally connecting. I
Yeah.
think, is that the same as human beings being in a place and hugging each other and being there for each other? Probably not, but it's just the next best thing, right? I agree. So I think that's fair. If there's nobody else that wants to say anything, I'll just like quickly talk about a few things, and then we'll talk about. I just do generic tips, and then tips, and then I'll take questions from you. So I think this is what I hear, right? I can just say one of the advantages of being a salaried faculty is you don't have to do private practice. So right, so most of us see as many patients as we can, and then do a lot of academic work. But I think with the pandemic, that is not a choice anymore. And it's pretty much all over the United States right now. There is overwhelmingly an increase in anxiety. There is overwhelmingly an increase in something that I think right now is called COVID phobia, right? There's a name for it. An increase in sort of like chronic PTSD, which, like, we saw this big stressor, a meteor hit us. We sort of like stepped up, we cleaned up, we washed those groceries, we took care of our kids. And now that it's like tapered off, we're just like, oh my God, like, I can't sleep very well. I don't know if this is ever going to go away. Just a slight increase in that anxiety. So, sort of chronic PTSD symptoms. And the big thing I see with seniors is existential issues. Am I ever going to see my kids again, my grandkids? Like, how many more years have I got? And am I wasting my life? Like, I could be on a vacation in Florida or like Bahamas. I wanted to go to Italy, and this, we had it all planned, and this thing happened. And I think just one, this sense of loss of control and a loss of almost like grieving the life that we knew, where everything was orderly. We knew, you have to save for retirement. Once you're retired, you travel. This is your plan. Thanksgiving is family getting together. Christmas is our grandkids coming home. All of that changed. And so there was this big sense of loss, right? And then this big sense of loneliness and social isolation. And there have been studies that show that the social isolation we feel during this pandemic is kind of similar to the isolation people feel when they're depressed, right? Like young people that withdraw from the society and then go on to sort of like do sort of damaging stuff to themselves, sort of feel the same sort of isolation. They withdraw, they don't feel people understand them, and then that leads to sort of them making impulsive, questionable decisions. But elder, mature people who probably never had an inpatient hospitalization kind of face the same sort of social isolation. It feels similar. And then there are little physical things, lack of exercise, right? You'd go out. If you lived in an apartment complex, you'd take a few laps around the apartment complex. Of course, there would be people, but you would do your stuff. You'd go to the gym. You'd get your exercise in the mall. Maybe all of that can't be done right now. And so, unless you're living in sort of like the suburbs or a rural area, all of that has become difficult, leading to sort of a decrease in blood pressure problems if you have diabetes, and then the elderly sort of have lowered immunity. So then that this worrying about being high risk for the pandemic, right? Like that also increases your anxiety. So confusion, loneliness, the sort of stress symptoms, anxiety, depression about the way this is going to go, and not being able to be with your loved ones. I think these are sort of like the more common issues that I see. Another big thing that I also see is existential issue, right? Like aging in this pandemic. A lot of elderly, but the wise few that you, right, like that have lived through the polio epidemic, that have heard about the Spanish flu, are able to sort of be resilient and say, we've lived through that, we'll live through this, right? Like that wasn't much different. This isn't. And then there are others who say, but this is different, right? Like the world was very small then. We didn't travel as much. Whatever happened, happened, and then we could control it. Uh, but we keep traveling, right? Like we just like found out that there's a newer mutation in the UK. How long before it comes down to all of us, right? Like should we ban these flights again? Like, is this gonna keep happening? Like, are we going to keep infecting each other? And I think these issues are just something that people face all the time. What can you do about it, right? And I think, like you said, most of you are a positive bunch. The not seeing your grandkids, the not seeing your kids, I don't know if there's a replacement for that. And that I think is really, that's especially hard for all of us. And the way to do that is, the way to sort of like make up for part of that loss is to just keep in touch with them digitally, right? Like Zoom them, call them, Skype them, um, try to have as much structure as possible, try to do those Zoom Thanksgivings like we all did, try to do those Zoom Diwalis, Zoom Christmases, right? Zoom Navratri, which is what happened, uh, right? And just have a sense that this is different, right? Like it's not the same, but it's interesting and it's different. And when things go back to being normal, we will get back to doing it. And the immunity and lack of exercise. And I think the way, and most of you do your mind body people, so I think you would know that. For me, this pandemic has been very the revelation of this pandemic has been how much you can do inside your own home, right? Could you do asanas, which are these yoga postures, which help you calm yourself down, which help you calm? They're called psychophysical exercises. They physically exercise your body, they exercise your glands, they improve flexibility, and then help improve tranquility. And I think there's two kinds of exercises. I'm not going to go into details. If someone's interested, I'm happy to talk about it. There's asanas and mudras, right? Asanas are most of these lotus poses and snake posture. These are postures that are supposed to be easily held. These are postures that most of us can try. I mean, it might take, if you're unfamiliar with it, it might take a few days to get used to it. But like things that you can easily do. And then there are mudras. These are also yoga postures, but they are not the easiest. But they have the most effect on your glands and your mind. Um, and so practicing them and then practicing meditation, sort of grounding yourself in reality, radically accepting the reality, and then at the same time trying to distance yourself from from the goings on, right? Like this is what it is, what it is. Like I wish it was different, but it's really not. And now that it's here, like what can I do about it? And one of the great things I think is I hear from Shubha. I think you came up with it, and I think Mr. Pradhan and I think both of you said the same thing, right? The gratitude for for what's there. I mean, sure, there is sadness around and loss around, but there's also every situation has a silver lining. Like what good can come of this? Like the kids are home. It's one long extended holiday. I wish it wasn't. I wish they were at school. But there is something good about having them home, having them safe, and gratitude for the fact that we can stay safe, we can stay home, we can stay warm. Gratitude for the FedEx person, the UPS person that's transferring the vaccines, that's doing the groceries, that's sort of helping humanity survive, right? and 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 then being able to appreciate the good things, the things that you have, and and then just sort of knowing that this too shall pass, right? Like everything does. The only thing constant in life is change. uh, it's hard to know where this will go from here, but humanity has survived a lot, right? And so we probably will, if we don't murder ourselves and the planet before before this is all done, we'll probably survive. And this gave the planet a break, uh, right? And dolphins were back in the Venice canals, and the pollution levels were way lower at the beginning of the pandemic. So I think they just looking at the bright side of this pandemic, as little as that might be. I think practicing gratitude meditation, practicing just grounding yourself, detaching yourself. These I think are good ways to cope. And then consistently doing that, having a structure to your day. Waking up at a certain time, hydrating yourself, self care, eating well, trying to sleep on time, and then having a structure to your day can really help you cope with this.
I think, maybe some people may not share, but there are some people whose partners got sick with some serious conditions, and there is a stress of coping up, and what to do, and how much can we do, and what sort of it should be, and how to face what we might face, and things like that. So any advice on those type of strategies might be useful.
No, sorry. No, thank you for bringing that. That's the hard. I think that's the hardest part. One, getting sick during this time where the hospitals are full, right? Like just getting sick, decompensating in your illness, and then getting sick with COVID. Both hard. Maybe one's harder than the other, but they're both anxiety provoking. And then caring for your partner, it's really hard. I would emphasize self care again. I mean, of course, you have, it's your choice, right? Like we've made this decision to be there for each other. And I think if you, some of us can't, right? Like the hospitals have protocols, and you can't be there for the loved one, and just forgiving yourself for not being able to be there, because I think you're actually serving the greater humanity by like not going in there. You're actually, like, I think Alan, you said, like tamping the spread of this, right? Like by just not being there in the hospital, by not like spreading this disease, you're actually doing everyone, the greater community, a favor. So you just being there when you need to, but like being at home, forgiving yourself for not being able to be there. And then self-care, like strengthening your immunity so that you don't you don't so that you don't have to be the second casualty in the line, right? Just hydrating yourself, sleeping, meditating, natural remedies. I don't know what's the evidence that they work, but maybe it's a placebo effect, right? Like you take kadha, you feel better about yourself, your immunity is better, and you don't have a cold. I think there is a part that plays in the whole schedule of things. I also think some of these natural remedies are very underrated, and they really do help. Like for now, I think there is evidence that turmeric is much more antiseptic than we thought it was, right? And turmeric is such a huge part of like all these kadhas. And so cinnamon helps with hypertension. We now know that. And so I think taking care of yourself, um, and being there for the other person as much as you can, um, and meditating, just to keep yourself sane, at least twice a day, at least for 15 minutes at a time, I think really goes a long way, sort of in allaying your anxiety, and not burning yourself out caring for the person that's sick. And I think, if out of all these things you had to choose one or two, number one, I would say sleep. Number two, meditate. I think if you don't do these things, then things you can burn out pretty easily. So I think sleep, 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 hydrate, meditate, meditate, meditate.
The theme is that it's the Zoom burnout. There are so many classes every day on Zoom
Yes.
that even people who don't work,
Yes.
they spend more screen time, like 9 hours sometimes,
Yes.
and the screen time, it's for some people, for some seniors in this group also, it's true.
Yeah.
There is a lot of media influence since like 4 in the morning. That loneliness creates that companion. So your television becomes your companion. Nobody's listening to what's happening, but it's going in the background.
Yeah.
And it causes some dormant stress, which they don't notice because they're agitated. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So sometimes when they join the Zoom call, I just unmute everyone. And there is like, look, 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 look. It's like a big market in the background, and say, guys, unless there is quiet theme, we will not start the program. And then it goes up in like a couple of minutes. So maybe if you give some guidelines on how, may you already mentioned the regimental thing, like waking up at certain time, eating certain time, and it becomes negligible because sometimes you are just disturbed by the media or whatever you're watching. You're not really into it, but you're part of it, somehow.
Right. And I think there's nothing good on the news.
Yeah, exactly.
And part of having like 24-hour news cycle is sensationalism sells. And so really, like, there's just a lot of stuff going on in the background, which subconsciously you can pick on those things that are going on, and it can cause subconscious stress. Another thing with watching television, and I think part of it is like we're all Netflixing, we're all doing Hulu.
Yeah.
I think we're all doing it, and I think you need to do what you need to do to stay inside. I think that's important. It's important to stress that too, right? Stay inside. Try not to meet people. I know it's easy for us to think, just my son, he's not sick, I'm not sick, we know each other, let's meet up. And I think this is how the disease spreads, right? Like we think we're the person we're meeting with is safe, but maybe he might not be. Like, we don't know how people are exposed, and we know young people can be asymptomatic carriers. So I think it is important to stay inside. So I think you do what you have to, right? But moderate what you're watching. Watching too much TV, one is the stress that Sachinji you said, and two, it's the blue light, right? Like when television came and people were falling asleep, so then they came up with this blue light, where this blue light is actually designed to agitate our ascending reticular system. It's designed to keep us awake. So if you watch too much TV, you will have trouble sleeping at night. It doesn't matter if you watch it in the day, it doesn't matter if you watch it at night. So turn on the self-monitoring function on your iPhone or your laptop, so that you know how much screen time you're having in a day, right? And I think prioritize what is important, like talking to your grandchild, talking to your son or your daughter, and then attending this wellness session or attending a meditation session. And some are important, and the rest of it, just go to your backyard, take a walk, take some deep breaths, meditate. It's important to have a structure. I think if you don't have a structure, if you meld into the couch and become a couch potato, you're only going to increase your sense of isolation. And that is going to be compounded if you have a sick one to care for. So, right, like, so you're spending all your time caring for the sick one, which is stressful. And then the rest of it, you're spending time watching television or being on Zoom or, or reading something, long form article on the New York Times, or the Observer. And all of that in isolation can be a good thing. But if you're doing too much of that, you are going to experience isolation. And that's not good for your mental health. So I would say moderate the content that you're taking in. Just decide if it's important or not. And I think one of I don't know how much if you do cable TV versus doing Netflix or Hulu. And one of the things that these days OTT platforms do is you end up binge watching a lot of shows, right? And that can just, you don't know what happened to those 5 hours of your time. You just like go in, you're multitasking, you're also watching that can also sort of affect your mental health. So I think I would say tell yourself how much screen time you're going to have today, and then draw a Lakshman Rekha, and don't spend too much time on there. Tell yourself like maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes more, but not more than that. Get out, take a walk inside the house. Yoga poses, easy yoga, chair yoga, whatever, meditate. um, read a book. It's better than reading a book on screen, but if you have to, you could do Kindle, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
And I mean, on the spiritual perspective too, I see some people are overloaded with the spirituality too. So like there's so much stuff going on, and sometimes that's also spinning their minds and it's overwhelming. Like sometimes you want to say like, okay, the not isolation, but maybe seclusion is a good idea for you because it's too much overload of information, which we can't handle.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So I practice Anand system of meditation, and we grow up hearing like no amount, like all satsanga is good satsanga,
Good
right? Like
satsanga,
they
yeah.
can't be too much of a bad thing, but maybe sometimes there can be. Um, but I think in the big scheme of things, Satyajit,
Yeah,
that's the least part of your worry, unless you're only passively watching and not practicing, in which case you're right, it can be overwhelming, right? Like you're just like taking a lot in and you're not putting it into practice. So I'd say be circumspect, listen, and then practice, like put it
yeah. I
in.
mean, the point I wanted to make is the question becomes like, who am I? What I'm doing here? Why me? So it can go into those directions,
Right.
especially because we haven't. There are many people who never
Right.
have time or never thought of deep spiritual
Right.
things.
Right. Good question. Sorry. Then you go on a nihilistic existential path.
Yes.
Good question. That's right. And I think it's you're walking a thin line between spirituality and almost like depression, right?
Yeah.
Where you're going between like, who am I? Why am I here? These are all
Yeah.
very valid questions. These
Yeah.
are all existential questions. They all lead to understanding the intangible.
Right.
But where does it go into, like everything is just Maya, nothing is true, nothing exists, there's no
Right.
point in living? I think if
Right.
you're seeing yourself going there, then I'd say walk back a little, meditate. Because I think
Right.
these answers, if you're constantly intellectualizing, sorry, I'm using
Right.
big words, but
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
are, at some point, this is, if you're asking yourself these questions and if you're actually doing something about it, if you're reading philosophy, if you're reading Nietzsche, or if you're reading, um, Patanjali, or if you're reading Pravat Ranjan Sarkar, or if you're reading um, Maharshi Yogi, then I would say you're actually doing something about these questions. But if you're constantly asking these questions and you're intellectualizing it, you're only spending time in this, then that's a defense, right? And it's not a very in some cases it can be a good defense mechanism, but it's not a very mature defense mechanism. And in that case, you can then go off into a wrong tangent. You can then go off into depression. So that in that case, Satyajit, you're right.
Yeah.
Take a step back, do something physical, like do your yoga postures, do your meditation, read, um, and read good stuff. Like, I mean, try not to read Thomas Hardy, or don't maybe not. I don't know if there's a Buddhist around here, but maybe nihilism is not a good. Maybe this is not a good time to go cracking the nihilism code.
Right.
Right? Yeah. I'd say if you're right. You're right. If you're going from existentialism to nihilistic thoughts about why am I here? What's the point? There is no point in all of this. Then I think that's actually a sign of of an illness, right? And
Yeah.
and you have to treat it. You have to meditate. You have to do yoga postures. And if it gets to a point where you feel hopeless, then you have to see a psychologist, or see a therapist, or see a psychiatrist. Because I think these are good questions, but these can easily, you're walking a fine balance, and you can easily fall off the path.
I mean, we have seen a couple of examples, like few people had to get admissions in the hospital. And this was very helpful for them during that time. They still were able to join on Zoom. And that was their, nice oasis point, saying, okay, this was very helpful to me.
Right. Absolutely.
Then the other ones are, they are sick, but now they never questioned these questions before. And
Right.
they're saying, there's so many healthy people, why me? Those kind of things.
Yeah.
And the compartmentalizing, like you said, or putting the structure, saying, okay, the meditation yoga, it's 2 hours or 1 hour, reading 1 hour, walking 1 hour can surely help into those things.
Absolutely. And I think sorry, just coming back to your previous question, I think one of the ways about when you're feeling hopeless, when you're feeling like there's no point, also meeting with people, meeting with community helps, right? Like, especially
Yeah.
a Zoom community like this, knowing that you're not alone, you're not the only one that's going through this. There's pretty much at least a bunch of people that are going through the same thing that you're going through, because this is so universal, right? So just knowing and reaching out to your community really helps. Why me? That's a tough question, right? Like, I've never been sick, I've never been ill. Why me? um the karma theory is a really complicated theory. I don't think I quite understand it. I think that's for people like Dada Abhiraman and Dada here to expound on. I don't know, but it is what it is, right? I wish none of us ever get sick, but I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, if you're sick, we all have a chance of getting sick, right? The odds are high with this virus, um, and there are certain people that are higher risk, but no one's at a no risk, right? Like, everyone's at a risk of getting sick, and I don't know. I mean, take care of yourself, and then yeah, if you're sick, take care of yourself medically, and then once you pass that, just, structure in your life. Get up, have a certain time to wake up, have a certain sort of structure. I don't know what it is, like taking some water, maybe taking a walk, maybe some asanas, yoga postures, maybe some meditation. Get up, cook for yourself. If you're not someone who's cooked, I don't know, fix up your breakfast, and spend time doing it, right? Like, be mindful, just be aware of what you're doing and be there. Don't think about someone else when you're fixing up your breakfast. Very mindfully fix up your breakfast, enjoy it, and then have structure to your life. I mean, then you probably can watch TV or something, and then have lunch, and then meet with your family. Have a structure and try to follow that structure as much as possible, because I think that structure grounds you, and then it stops you from going into sort of like this mindless questions about why me. A lot of these questions, which are important and might need an answer, but this might not be the best time to keep asking those questions, and keep getting sucked into that vortex.
What might be some red flags or warning signs to see from the behavioral or mental health perspective during this time, to identify maybe something which I need to pay attention to?
I think everyone has a different way of dealing with the pandemic, and I think a lot of us are processing it, and I think initially not being able to sleep, worrying about it, ruminating about it would all have been a perfectly normal way to cope with it. But if someone's really not able to sleep for sustained periods of time, or is not eating and is losing weight, is ruminating constantly about the pandemic to the point that it's affecting their relationships, it's affecting their work, or it's affecting their being able to function at home, like they're not, they're constantly taking baths like 4 times a day, or like constantly cleaning the counters, that's all they're doing, they're not cooking, they're not taking care of themselves. um, or if they're talking about hopelessness or helplessness or wanting to die, or they're doing like risky things because they just want this to end, like going out without a mask, not because of political reasons, but because they feel like, what's the point in living? There's only pain, right? And that they want to end it all. Or if someone's talking about wanting to end it all, or suicide, then I would say those would be times where you would seek help.
Right.
If someone's like ruminating to a point that they can't function,
Right.
and it's not something that passes, like if it's not something that happens for a week or two, then I think that would be a time where you would seek professional help. Usually ruminations and not being able to sleep, not being able to eat, these sort of things, when you get in touch with the community, when you're not isolated anymore, when you're talking to people that are going through the same thing and they validate you, you're able to process it, right? Like you're able to
Yeah.
say, this was very stressful, this is terrible, but there's also other people in the same boat, we'll get by, we'll get through this together. And that's where communities like this help. Satsang helps, right? Like having people thinking
Yeah.
about positive stuff, thinking about gratitude, talking about how we can conquer this. All of that stuff helps, definitely helps. But some of us, it's not. Sometimes it's not enough, and then when it's not enough, if it continues doing that, then I think it might be time to seek professional help. Um, maybe a small period of time where you might need medications, you take that and then continue doing what you're doing, continue doing mind body stuff. And then you don't need any external help, then you can just heal yourself. Does that
Yeah,
answer your
yeah,
question?
yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, because we do have luckily some structure to these groups. Every day from 9 to noon, we have very good programs, and there are 4 or 5 different chapters. So each chapter has 40, 50 people who join them and things.
Lovely.
And there are some cumulative programs, sometimes, common celebrations for all the cross forums together and things. So that's pretty nice in that sense.
Nice.
The concern sometimes is like maybe how the seniors who are in 80s, or how can they manage the Zoom burnout? Now, means it's amazing. Like we have the biggest one is 94, and they know how to use iPad. And I needed some script in Hindi, and I was struggling to make up with it. And I was talking to some senior, and she said, "Oh, just tell me what to say." And then in 5 minutes, she had it because she knows how to speak, and the computer types it in the script. So
Oh,
all that, yeah, totally. And
yeah.
so these kind of are very adorable adaptations. These people never even use computers, but they know exactly. And anytime we have program, they say, "What's the Zoom ID? What's the password?" But how to also see that Zoom burnout, maybe what can they do to maybe avoid it in the first place? Or
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I I wish I knew, because like that's something I'm trying to avoid too, right?
everybody's
Right. I think by the end of this, we would all need ophthalmologists sometime when we're a little older. Um, but I think this is just something this is a guideline, I just have it from medical school. When we talk about our ability to concentrate, right? Like, and I think this is what most of our sessions and in business schools and medical schools are based on, that your brain is able to concentrate for 40 to 45 minutes at a time, and anything after that, if you sort of push it, it's an overload. So I
right.
think so that's why you have sessions for like 45 minutes, and then you have a break,
Yeah.
and then you have other sessions, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd say, like, if your Zoom session goes on bigger than 30 to 45 minutes, it's time to like sort of like log out a little, go take a walk, take a break, hydrate yourself, come back, maybe have sort of a certain amount of time that you're going to attend. sort of also draw boundaries. And this is hard for me. This is sort of Sachin, I think it's pretty much hard for all of us to draw boundaries and say, this is how much I can do, and I can't do more than that. And I think part of avoiding Zoom burnout is sort of, knowing, I mean, we're all interested in everything, right? And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
all
yeah.
interesting. Like there's this, I mean, this world has opened up. One of the silver linings of the pandemic is like the world has opened up and Zoom has really facilitated the way. And
Yeah.
everything sounds interesting and lovely, but there's only this much you can do.